can inform the House that I have not selected either of the reasoned amendments. To move the second reading, I call the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I beg to move that the bill be read a second time, and that we come together now in the very best traditions of this House to scrutinise this legislation and then take the decision that this country expects to make the verdict of the British people the law of the land, so that we can leave the European Union with our new deal on October the 31st. Mr. Speaker, I of course wish that this decision on our national future had been taken through a meaningful vote on Saturday, but I respect perfectly the motives of my right honourable friend, the member for West Dorset, though I disagree with the effects of his amendment. And I regret too that after Saturday's vote, the government has been forced to act on the advice of the Cabinet Secretary and to take the only responsible course, which is to accelerate our preparations for a no-deal outcome. But today, Mr. Speaker, we have the opportunity to put all that right. Because if this House backs this legislation, if we ratify this new deal, which I believe is profoundly in the interest of our whole United Kingdom and our European friends, we can get Brexit done and move our country on. And we can de-escalate those no-deal preparations immediately and turn them off next week, and instead concentrate on the great enterprise of building a new relationship of the closest cooperation and friendship, as I said on Saturday, with our European neighbours, and addressing our people's priorities at home. And I give way with pleasure to the right honourable gentleman.
A number of people before they vote today will be very concerned about various rights which are enshrined in Europe, but which might be vulnerable if and hopefully when we leave. One of those sets of rights will be on rights for working people. Would the Prime Minister give an undertaking? The bill, so we have it on the record. The bill is quite clear. If the government agrees with enhanced rights to working people, that will become the law of the land here. If the government disagrees with a single one or a number of enhanced rights, will he give an undertaking that he will bring those proposals before the House? Will we have the chance to vote and instruct the government to accept them, please?
Mr. Speaker, I can of course give the right honourable gentleman that assurance that not only will this country maintain the highest standards both for environmental protection and also of course for workers' rights, but in the event that this House wishes to have higher standards than those proposed by the EU, or if this House wishes to adopt standards proposed by the EU and the government disagrees, there will of course be an amendable motion to give this House the opportunity to have its say, and we will ensure that that is the case. And Mr. Speaker, if we pass this bill tonight, we will have the opportunity to address the priorities not just of our relations with the EU, but people's priorities at home. And I believe that if we do this deal, if we pass this deal and the legislation that enables it, we can turn the page and allow this Parliament and this country to begin to heal and unite. For those like me who believe our interests are best served by leaving the European Union and taking back control, this deal delivers the biggest restoration of sovereignty in our parliamentary history and the biggest devolution of power to UK democratic institutions. I'll give way with pleasure.
Thank the Prime Minister for giving way and absolutely recognise that people who voted for Brexit did not necessarily vote on economic lines. However, the government is refusing to publish an impact assessment of this deal. He is expecting MPs to vote for something that we know will damage this country economically without revealing the impact assessment. What does this government have to hide?
Prime Minister.
If I may say to the honourable lady, I understand the point that she makes, but she's had an answer, I believe, from my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, yesterday. And I think it will be clear to everybody that the best way to avoid any disruption from a no-deal Brexit is to vote for this deal today, to vote for this bill, to get it done, and I think that will unleash a great tide of investment into this country and a demonstration of confidence in the UK economy. And by voting for this deal tonight, we will deliver a powerful, positive shot in the arm for the UK economy, and I hope very much that she does so. Once more, under this agreement, British people will be able to live under laws made by representatives whom they elect and who they alone can elect and remove. Laws enforced by British judges in British courts. I'll give way to my right honourable.
Well, I'm most grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. But he must recognise that the arrangements he has come to for Northern Ireland precisely don't deliver that for the people of Northern Ireland. Of course, that may be a matter where in Northern Ireland opinion will be divided as to whether they want it or not. But the reality is that the vassalage clauses, as I think were described by the Right Honourable Member of the Leader of the House in the past, are going to continue to apply to Northern Ireland after the transition is ended for the rest of Great Britain. How does he square that with the recovery of sovereignty promised to the entirety of the British people?
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman, but I think we can square that with very simply by pointing out that, yes, of course, there are arrangements, transitory arrangements for some aspects of the Northern Ireland economy, but those automatically dissolve and are terminated after 4 years unless it is the majority decision of the Assembly of Northern Ireland to remain in alignment with those arrangements, either in whole or in part. And the principle of consent is therefore at the heart of these arrangements. Under this bill, British farmers will escape the frequently perverse effects of the Common Agricultural Policy. British fishermen, liberated from arcane quotas, will be free to fish in a way that is both more sensible and more sustainable. And this House will be free to legislate for the highest possible standards. I'll give way with pleasure to the Right Honourable Lady of.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be well aware that there are actually 4 pages in his bill which address and enlarge the responsibilities of the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and the Northern Ireland Equality Commission. That's all very well and good, but there is not a single sentence in this bill which explains the new consent process contained in the Prime Minister's Brexit deal. I say very clearly to the Prime Minister, do not take the people of Northern Ireland for fools. We are not fools. The Prime Minister needs to explain in detail how his new consent process operates. In detail, please.
Well,
Prime Minister.
I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Lady, and of course the process for consent is set out in detail in the unilateral declaration made between us and the Republic of Ireland, and she will understand that it is, as I have indicated to the House, a process by which there are a small minority of economic arrangements in which Northern Ireland remains in alignment for sanitary and phytosanitary and for manufactured goods for 4 years, unless and until, by a majority vote of the Stormont Assembly, Northern Ireland elects to remain in alignment. Otherwise, for the vast majority of the Northern Irish economy, of course, Northern Ireland exits with the rest of the UK whole and entire, able to do free trade deals from the outset, able to participate in all the other benefits of Brexit. And I hope that point will commend itself to the Right Honourable Lady. I give way with pleasure to my Right Honourable friend.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister, and can I congratulate the Prime Minister to getting us to this critical point in the long Brexit journey. Relating to Clause 36, parliamentary sovereignty, could I invite the Prime Minister to confirm the UK will retain its own sovereign military capability as outlined in para 92 and 99 of the Political Declaration and not be committed to any EU mission, military initiative or procurement project unless we do so voluntarily?
Prime Minister.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend, and he alludes to an important change that we've been able to secure in the course of the negotiations, and he is absolutely right that full independence will be retained in that vital sphere of defence and security. I'm grateful to him for drawing attention to it. Let me just make a little bit of progress, if I may, Mr. Speaker. This House will be free not only from the Common Agricultural Policy, but from the Common Fisheries Policy, and free also to legislate to the highest standards. And I think this is a crucial thing for the House to grasp. I will give way on fish. On fish,
Most grateful, I rather give away. Will he give the House a categorical assurance that we will not make the mistake of the 1970s and use our marine resources and fish stocks to be traded as a bargaining chip during the upcoming negotiations? Will he guarantee that we will take total 100% control of all our waters within the EEZ and all our resources, and like any other independent marine nation, will then indulge in common sense negotiations of a reciprocal nature with our marine neighbours on an annual basis?
Minister.
I can happily give my right honourable friend, who's campaigned long on these issues valiantly, that assurance, Mr. Speaker, and I can confirm that we will take back 100% control of the spectacular marine wealth of this country, not least the marine wealth of Scotland, which the SNP would discard as senselessly as superfluous catch dictated by the Common Fisheries Policy itself, Mr. Speaker. This House will be free. This House will be free in just a moment. I will give way with pleasure in just a moment. This House will be free to legislate for the highest possible standards. And let me stress that nothing in this bill undermines workers' rights or this House's natural desire to protect our environment. On the contrary, I give way.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way, and I know the Prime Minister has been doing a very good job trying to reassure MPs like myself from towns that voted leave. But looking at workers' rights in this current document, can the Minister explain the loopholes around those workers' rights that don't give us the security that we would need regarding non-regression for communities like mine, manufacturing communities that need those workers' rights?
Minister.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady, and she raises an important point, and people will need reassurance about this. There can be no regression. The UK will maintain the highest possible standards, and let me perhaps make the point more clearly. If the EU decides that it wishes to introduce a new piece of legislation on social protection, then it is, of course, automatic that this House should consider that. And as I say, there will be an amendable motion by which the government will give parliamentary time for the implementation of that measure. And that is the opportunity that this bill gives us. And in essence, it takes back to this House the powers to decide these matters. And I do not believe that we should shy away from these responsibilities or lack confidence in our collective ability to use these powers for the public good. Because it is thanks to the efforts of Labour and Conservative members that this House is already ensuring that this country does more to tackle climate change than almost any other country in the EU. Our environmental bill will enshrine the highest standards possible. I give way with pleasure to the Honourable Lady from Great Britain.
Thank you, Prime Minister. There is a difficulty. There is a fundamental issue of trust in his word, I'm sorry to say. So if the Prime Minister tells this House that he is committing to reviews of things like unfair dismissal protections, including reducing the qualifying period from 2 years to 1 year, and anomalies in employee terms and conditions in relation to TUPE regulations, will the government please write into this bill the date by which BEIS will begin the consultations on those really important rights?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we've already said that we will set out how we propose to address the concerns of honourable members around unfair dismissals and TUPE. And I do understand the desire of the Honourable Lady to get cracking on this, and I know that my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, is going to be writing to members with more details. But I can certainly commit to her now, across the floor of the House, that we will indeed commit to a date for the implementation of those measures. Our environmental bill, Mr. Speaker, enshrines the highest standards in law, far-reaching, legally binding targets to reduce plastics, restore biodiversity, and clean up our air and water. I give way with pleasure.
The Prime Minister, does he agree with himself when he said we should go into these negotiations with a clear agenda to root out the nonsense of the social chapter, the Working Time Directive, the Atypical Work Directive, and other job-destroying regulations? If that's what he said then, why should we believe a word that he says on this?
Mr. Speaker, because it is absolutely clear on the face of this bill and from what I have said that this country will maintain the highest possible standards and will give this House the collective ability to keep pace with Brussels and indeed to do better. As I say, we have the highest possible environmental standards. We will match those environmental standards that Brussels brings forwards. And indeed, we have the opportunity now to do better, Mr. Speaker. I've stressed for 4 years. No, that's not true. The honourable gentleman says from a sedentary position we've always had the opportunity to do better. He's not. I'm afraid he is mistaken, because there are plenty of ways in which we are currently prohibited from going forward with higher standards, as he may know. Under this bill, we will have the power in this House to do something for which I think the people of this country have yearned for years, and that is to strengthen controls on live transport of animals. And I hope that we will do that now. That is currently forbidden, as he well knows, under EU law. On fiscal measures, for instance, which I'm sure he knows, we will now have the power to cut VAT on sanitary products. And as for the protection of workers, Mr. Speaker, we will now be able, under this bill, to take action against employers and agencies who undercut our laws, including where agencies bring in overseas labour from the EU so that local people do not get a look in. And I believe that is currently impossible within the EU. Just for the benefit of the House, I will give way in a second to the Right Honourable. Clause 34 and the accompanying provisions in Schedule 5 include a duty on any minister, to get to the point that's been raised, who introduces relevant legislation to make clear that workers' rights will not be weakened in any way. Whether it is air pollution, tackling air pollution, or enhancing biodiversity, this country can do better than simply by sticking with EU norms. We can achieve our vision of a dynamic, high-wage, low-tax market economy precisely because we champion high skills and high standards. It will be I give way to the Right Honourable Lady.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way, and like him, I would like to get out of the European Union as quickly and speedily as possible. But what more can he do to reassure the people of Northern Ireland who are feeling that they are being cut off, and particularly when they could have accepted perhaps some regulations between trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, because that happens at the moment, but have been absolutely astonished to find that trading between Northern Ireland and Great Britain is somehow now treated as if they are sending it to a foreign country. That is not acceptable.
I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Lady, and I know that it is very, very important that we stress, and I must make myself absolutely clear, Northern Ireland is leaving the EU with the rest of the UK whole and entire. And we have achieved with this deal what I think few people thought was possible, that Northern Ireland is leaving the EU as part of a single customs territory with the rest of the UK. And to her specific point, if I may, Mr. Speaker, to her specific point, there will be no checks between NI and GB, and nor would she expect there to be, and that is made absolutely clear in Article 6 of the protocol that there was to be. It is up to the UK government to insist on unfettered access for trade NI, unfettered access for trade NI GB. And I give way with pleasure and with respect to the Right Honourable Gentleman.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister. It's quite clear that whatever he says about Northern Ireland being in the UK Customs Union, de facto the European Union Customs Code applies in Northern Ireland if the protocol comes into place, which requires exit declarations from Northern Ireland to Great Britain. Yes, it does. The Brexit Secretary said opposite yesterday it had to be corrected by HMRC. So look, what I would say to the Prime Minister is this. Is he saying that at the end of December 2020 that Northern Ireland will not go into the protocol if there's a free trade agreement, and that if we are in the protocol and a free trade agreement is agreed, that we will automatically come out of it, and that will be written into law?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, just for the clarification of the Right Honourable Gentleman, I know he raised this already, but there are no checks GBNI. There will be some light touch measures to ensure there's no illegal trade in endangered animal species, and banned firearms, which I think he would agree was sensible. But of course, the most important point is that even these measures evaporate and are terminated automatically. They automatically dissolve unless a majority of the Northern Irish Assembly in Stormont votes to keep them. And furthermore, and to get to his point, of course, there is a further sense in which these measures are transitory, because of course they all may be replaced in the great work of beginning the free trade agreement and the new partnership that we intend to build between the UK and the EU, a work in which I devoutly hope that Northern Irish members will be involved in building a whole UK, whole world free trade policy. That is the prize that is before us, and it will be the UK and the UK alone that will control these vital standards as we leave. And to those, Mr. Speaker, who share my belief in the transformative power of free trade, perhaps the single greatest engine of global prosperity, a new deal enabled by this legislation will allow us to sign free trade agreements around the world. And I will give way with pleasure to the Honourable Lady.
Thank the Prime Minister for giving way. Schedule 5A of the Act lists workers' retained European Union rights. The directive on work-life balance for parents and carers is omitted from the schedule, along with many others in the same vein. How can those omissions be consistent with the Prime Minister's commitment to the highest possible standards for workers' rights?
Mr. Speaker, we've been very clear that we will maintain the highest possible standards, but I would be very happy to study what the honourable lady says, but I can assure her that there will be whatever the House believes has been omitted can easily be replaced. And I give way to the honourable lady from Don Valley.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way. I think across this House we all agree that there is a climate emergency and that the UK must be a leader, not a follower, when it comes to low-carbon living. Now, I welcome the pledge that an Environment Bill will enhance and not reduce the UK's standards. But will the Prime Minister commit today to reinforce this ambition with a clear non-regression clause, as we have on workers' rights, and write this into the bill? Would that not provide some of the reassurance the House needs about not only protecting but enhancing environmental standards?
Just gave you the nerve.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can indeed make that commitment, and I thank the honourable lady for the work that she is doing to champion the environment, and I would just remind her and remind the House that our Environment Bill will set up for the first time legally binding targets and an Office for Environmental Protection to enforce those targets in this country. And I remind her that in the event of the EU, the crucial thing I think that she will reassure her is that in the event of the EU bringing forward new legislation, we will, in this government, bring forward an amendable motion so that the House may choose to match those standards. And Mr. Speaker, I must, if I may, make some progress. This new deal will allow us to sign free trade agreements around the world, encouraging innovation, lowering prices, maximising opportunities for world-beating British companies to find new markets, and bringing good new jobs to communities who for too long have been left behind. And let me repeat, Mr. Speaker, in any future trade negotiations with our country, our National Health Service will never be on the table. All those points. But then, Mr. Speaker, I wish to say something not just to those who think that Brexit is a great opportunity, as I do, of course I do, but also to the 16 million who voted to remain. And I identify one in my honourable friend behind me.
In terms of workers' rights, the EU requires employers to offer 14 weeks maternity pay. In the UK, we offer 39 weeks maternity pay. If we wanted to reduce workers' rights, why wouldn't this government have done that already?
I think, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes exactly the right point, that this government is a government that wishes to have the highest possible standards for workers across the country, because that is what we believe that is the right way forward for the British economy. And let me repeat, and I'm glad he made that point, Mr. Speaker. I wish to address the 48% whose concerns must always be in our minds. The revised political declaration sets out a vision of the closest possible cooperation between the UK and our European friends. A relationship, and I quote, rooted in the values and interests that the European Union and the United Kingdom share, anchored in their common European heritage. And to British citizens living in EU countries and to EU citizens who have made their homes here and who have contributed so much, this bill protects their rights, ensuring that they can carry on living their lives as before. And I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Thank you. The Prime Minister has said, of his ministers said they're against live animal exports. Does this mean Dover to Calais, or longer journeys from GB, Stranraer to Northern Ireland, or longer journeys still to the Hebrides to Orkneys to the Shetlands. When he says he's ending live animal exports, what does he mean? We need details on this. Are they the short journeys to the continent only, or longer journeys to Northern Ireland?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. He rather makes my point for me, because of course what he may not realise is that there are currently animals being shipped from this country to Spain, indeed to North Africa, in conditions of extreme distress. And I do not believe that it would be the will of this House, or indeed the will of the member opposite, that we should continue on that basis. And I say to those who care, like me, for the rights of EU nationals living in this country, I argued during the referendum that we should guarantee their rights in this country immediately and unilaterally. And I regret that this did not happen, but the bill today completes that job. I give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend, and he's being characteristically generous in giving way. Could I, just so that we're absolutely clear, just ask my right honourable friend again, going back to the Northern Ireland issue, is it his and the government's intention, which I understood it and still understand it to be, that in the phase in which we negotiate a free trade agreement, that we would negotiate that on the basis that Northern Ireland would form a whole and singular part of that agreement and therefore would be treated exactly the same as Kent?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can give exactly that assurance. That is exactly what this bill does, and that's exactly what this agreement has secured. And I give way to the honourable lady from West Lancashire.
Prime Minister, my constituents voted to leave 55-45, but they want to ensure, they want to believe, and it is a question of trust, that there will be certainty and decent rights for all workers as we leave the EU and in the future. I welcome the announcement that there'll be an employment reform bill, but you know, when he's got his pen out in answer to my honourable friend, could he actually set the date and tell us when he's going to put that date in this bill so we know it happens?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think I can confirm that we will be doing that, but it's probably best done in the course of the bill, and that we should get on with the debate as fast as possible. Let me come, if I may, Mr. Speaker, before I take some interventions, to our compatriots in Northern Ireland, because this bill upholds in full the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, as Lord Trimble has attested, and our unwavering commitment to Northern Ireland's place, in the Union. And I give way to the honourable gentleman.
The central plank, Prime Minister, of the mechanisms for ensuring both communities are protected in the Belfast Agreement is, and I state from the agreement itself, to ensure that all sections of the community can participate and work together, and that all sections are protected. Arrangements to ensure key decisions are taken on a cross-community basis. How does that square with the terms of this agreement, and which have been stated by yourself in this House that decisions will be made on a majority basis?
Well, Prime Minister, very grateful to the honourable gentleman, and he knows that, and I thank him and his party for the work that they have done to help us to change this deal very, very much for the better. And they played he played an instrumental role in that. But on the point that he raises, he knows that this is a reserved issue, and I simply return to my point. It is the salient feature of these arrangements that they evaporate, they disintegrate, they vanish unless a majority of the Northern Ireland Assembly elects to keep them. And I think that it is up to members of the Northern Ireland Assembly to assemble that majority if they so choose. And further, there is an opportunity, of course, to vary those arrangements in the course of the free trade agreement and the new partnership, which I hope that he will join us in building together. This new deal explicitly respects the territorial integrity of the UK. It takes the United Kingdom whole and entire out of the EU. And of course there is a set of special provisions applying to Northern Ireland.
Order, I apologise for interrupting the Prime Minister, but a lot of members are bellowing in a rather bellicose fashion at the Prime Minister, but he's already made it clear that at the moment he's not giving way. He's taken a lot of interventions, he may take more, but he's proceeding with the development of his case. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I give way to the Honourable Member for West Belfast.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way, and I have heard clearly not only what he has tried to do this afternoon to assure this House, but also in answer to the question from the Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green. How can he square the pledge he has given that says Northern Ireland can fully benefit from free trade arrangements with the provisions in the agreement he agreed at Article 13.8 that require the EU to have a say in whether we succeed from the protocol arrangements?
Because there is absolutely no provision for the EU to have a say, Mr. Speaker, because as he knows, there are special provisions in the agreement that apply to Northern Ireland in respect, as I say, of trade in goods and sanitary and phytosanitary measures, the single electricity market. And the benefit of that alignment, that temporary 4-year alignment, Mr. Speaker, is of course that it allows us to avoid a hard border in Northern Ireland. That is its great benefit. It allows us to respect the Good Friday process. But those arrangements are automatically, may I complete? Are automatically terminated after...
I just very gently say to the honourable gentleman who's had an opportunity, I hope it's a point of order rather than a point of frustration. But point of order, Mr. Semi Wilson.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has claimed to the House today that the agreement does not rule out the interpretation which he has given to this House. But paragraph 8 of Article 13 states quite clearly that any subsequent arrangement between the United Kingdom and the Union shall indicate the parts of this protocol which it supersedes, and that the EU will have a say in that. How can he then claim to this House that there is total freedom of decision on this?
What I say to the honourable gentleman, as an experienced denizen of this House, is that that is a matter of consuming interest within the chamber and beyond. But the honourable gentleman is a cheeky chappy, because it's not a matter for adjudication by the chair. He's made his own point in his own way with considerable alacrity, to which the Prime Minister can respond if he wishes and not if he doesn't. The Prime Minister.
Speaker, well, thank you. I will give way in just a moment. But I will respond by saying, just repeating the point, Mr. Speaker, that those arrangements are automatically terminated after 4 years unless a majority in the Northern Ireland Assembly expressly decides to retain any or all of them, so that those arrangements naturally and legally dissolve into full alignment with the UK and with the whole of the UK. So the default position is alignment with the UK, unless, as I say, there is a majority vote in the Assembly against that alignment. And those arrangements can in any event be replaced by the future relationship based on a free trade agreement that we will conclude with the EU. And at the same time, the agreement ensures that Northern Ireland is part of the UK customs territory and benefits immediately from any UK trade deals. And Clause 21 gives effect to those measures in the protocol. And apart from those special provisions, there are no level playing field provisions covering only Northern Ireland. There's nothing in the new deal requiring any different treatment of Northern Irish services, which account for over 70% of the economy. And there is nothing in the revised political declaration which would oblige Northern Ireland to be treated differently in the future relationship with the EU, which we will soon begin to negotiate. And as I say, I will give way with pleasure.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way, and I couldn't believe for a minute, Mr. Speaker, that he is seeking to in any way deceive the House. But he has said repeatedly today that there will be no differences between the way in which Northern Ireland is treated vis-à-vis Kent or anywhere else in the rest of the UK. Why then does the
impact assessment produced by his own government, slipped out late last night, make quite explicit at point 241 that goods moving from GB to NI will be required to fill in import declarations and entry summary declarations, which will result in additional costs as a result of Northern Ireland. How does the Prime Minister square that fact with the bluster and rhetoric that he is serving out here today?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the House will know full well that these are transitory arrangements, and if the people of Northern Ireland choose to dissent from them, they melt away unless by a majority they choose to retain them. And there will be no checks, as I repeat, there will be no checks GB NI. There is nothing in the revised political declaration that obliges Northern Ireland to be treated any differently in the future relationship. And as I say, I would expect members from Northern Ireland to be involved intimately in devising a whole UK, whole world trade policy. And indeed the whole House. I give way to the pleasure of my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend. Isn't the truly fundamental point that to deliver the United Kingdom whole and secure and prosperous out of the European Union, members of this House need to vote for second reading and, yes, vote for the programme motion so it can all be done on time, and then stand firm behind him and his negotiating team so that he has the power to deliver just the relationship which is being implored upon him to put before the House in due course.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend has given excellent advice to the House, and I thank him very much for his support. And I wish to stress to my honourable friends that the whole House will be involved in devising that future partnership. I give way with pleasure to the honourable gentleman from Poplar.
Speaker, I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for his reassurances about workers' rights and the avoidance of race to the bottom and no regression, and that will be written into the bill because it's a huge issue for many members on this side of the House and needs to be recognised by many members on his side of the House. Can he give the same reassurances on consumer protection and that they will be written into the bill also?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I can indeed give the right honourable gentleman that assurance, and there will be no race to the bottom, and for honourable and right honourable members who wish to be involved in the building of our future partnership, there will be every opportunity at every stage for this House to be involved, and quite properly.
Order. There's so much noise in the chamber that I fear that the honourable gentleman from North Dorset, who enjoys the exalted status of the chairmanship of the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee, is unable to draw attention to the fact that he wishes to intervene in the debate, and that is regrettable for the honourable gentleman. But I've made the point. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to repeat our unequivocal commitment to consumer standards and protections, which I know will be welcomed by my honourable friend.
It is, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your good offices. Could I say to the Prime Minister, trying to square the difficult circle of delivering Brexit under the umbrella of the Good Friday Agreement and maintaining peace on the island of Ireland was always going to be a big ask. Not everybody will be happy with what the Prime Minister is bringing forward, but all communities should be happy that nobody is talking about a coach and horses being driven through the Good Friday Agreement, and there are no communities, particularly at the border, who are now fearful of a resurrection of violence and bloodshed and hatred. The Prime Minister is to be congratulated.
Prime Minister. I'm very grateful to the Chairman of the Select Committee for his remarks, because I do intend to bring the whole House into the process of decision-making and into our confidence and drawing on the expertise of the House, not least in environmental matters, on which I know the Honourable Lady speaks with great authority.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. Actually, what I wanted to ask him about, he's been giving so many reassurances to Labour members behind me. I wonder if he could give a reassurance to me about the fact of this trapdoor that is at the heart of this Brexit deal. We know that if there isn't an arrangement that's agreed by the end of December of next year, we risk crashing out with no deal. So could he give me the reassurance that he is going to extend that transition and he's going to guarantee now at the dispatch box that we will not crash out at the end of December of next year?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I can indeed give her the assurance that there will be no crashing out, because we will negotiate a great new friendship and partnership within the timescale that is allotted. I know that honourable members on all sides of the House have every confidence in this government to do that. They said that we couldn't change the withdrawal agreement in the 90 days that we had, and they said that we'd never get rid of the backstop. They said we wouldn't be able to get a new deal. We did get a new deal. We got a great deal for this House and this country, and we'll get a great new free trade agreement and a new partnership for our country. Mr. Speaker, that is the project that lies before us, ensuring that the great project can begin, of building a new friendship with our closest neighbours across the Channel. That is the common endeavour of our whole nation. And that will begin with Clause 31, which will give Parliament a clear role, including, I hope, the Honourable Lady.
The Prime Minister giving it away. Isn't the case that in order to get a deal with the EU, the Prime Minister had to make a choice over Northern Ireland? And the choice he made was to sign up to EU trading rules in order to get frictionless trade with Ireland and the rest of the EU. And isn't the truth that at the end of all of the negotiations the rest of the UK is going to face, we're going to face exactly the same dilemma? Yes. Remain close, sign up to the rules, in which case we give up our say, so what's the point of Brexit? Or break totally free, in which case what is the price? We have not made that choice. He's done it over Northern Ireland. We face it over the rest of the UK. This isn't getting Brexit done. It's continuing the agony for years to come.
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, obviously I have a vision of this country with a very close friendship and partnership with the EU, but obviously also being able to do free trade deals around the world. I do think that those objectives are compatible. I think the way it can be made compatible is evident here in this great new deal that we have done, but it is open to her, of course, to work with us to take it forward. And I give way with pleasure to the right honourable member for
Mr. Speaker, I congratulate the Prime Minister on securing a deal. I never doubted it for a minute. Can he reassure me that the moment this bill receives royal assent, hopefully sooner rather than later, he will work tirelessly, along with the Secretary of State for Bays, to secure the closest possible relationship to European science and research funding programs?
Yes, I thank my right honourable friend and brother very much for what he said, and he has worked tirelessly in that sphere himself. I know how much he values that cooperation, as indeed I know how much members across the House value that cooperation, and we will protect, preserve and enhance it. And indeed, as I say, honourable members across the House are going to be involved in that process, because Parliament is, as I say, under Clause 31, Parliament is given a clear role. And I give way, with pleasure, to the honourable member for Dover.
Thank the Prime Minister for giving way. He's been incredibly generous in this debate today. He will no doubt have heard, as I have heard, the dire warnings in certain quarters that if we leave the European Union, there will be problems at Dover and chaos on the roads of Kent. Can he assure the House and me and my constituents that with this deal there will be no problems at the Channel ports and no problems on Kent's roads?
I can indeed give that assurance, Mr. Speaker, and the best way to avoid any problems, whatever, is to vote for this deal tonight. And, Mr. Speaker, by your leave, I'm going to make some progress. Let's pause for a second and reflect on the scale of the choices before us. If we reject this new deal, what would the House be saying to the country and to the world. What's the alternative course of action open before us? To undo Brexit, cancel the greatest democratic exercise in this country's history. Even now, I find it impossible to believe that any Democrat would contemplate such a course. Time and again, this House has promised to honour the referendum. And the fact that the Leader of the Opposition is now proposing a rerun, I think, shows a regrettable contempt for the verdict of the British people. This House has repeatedly rejected a second referendum, and in my view, must emphatically do so again. I know some colleagues have been contemplating certain amendments that are not about delivering a new deal, but rather about trying to change it. And I give way with pleasure to my honourable friend.
Thank you. Will the Prime Minister agree that a referendum took place, a decision was made by the British people? It's up to Parliament to accept that decision and work with it. Not my words, but the words of the Leader of the Opposition.
My honourable friend has encapsulated the point perfectly, and I think that the right honourable gentleman should reflect on what he has said. What message would it send to our European friends? I give way to the honourable member for Wimbledon.
Can I thank my right honourable friend for giving way? He will know that when I worked closely with him when he was Mayor of London, how much he valued the contribution of EU citizens. I have the great fortune to represent a constituency with one of the highest proportion of EU citizens. Could I ask my honourable friend to look again at the arbitrary deadline for the application for settled status?
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to say that the settled status scheme is proceeding apace, and we have every hope that the entire 3.4 million will register by the time of the deadline. But the best way to give all our citizens confidence and security, and to give all our friends confidence and security, particularly the 3.4 million, is to get this deal through tonight, because this is how we protect their rights. And I know that there are some colleagues who want to change the deal and are contemplating some amendments that would change the fundamentals of the deal. And I have to ask the House, what would that say to our European friends about our good intentions? That we're proposing to come back to Brussels to ask for a third agreement, that we will put it to a fifth vote, perhaps after another 6 months or another year. Is there anyone who seriously believes that the EU would reopen the withdrawal agreement again? On the contrary, our European friends could not be clearer. The deal on the table is the one contained in this bill. And the decision for this House is whether to ratify this deal rather than going round in circles in a futile attempt to construct a new one. And then, Mr. Speaker, there is the question of yet further delay. And I know some colleagues have been contemplating the timetable of this bill and asking whether scrutiny should take longer. And I don't think we should be daunted in this House by the task we have before us. But let us work night and day if that is what it takes to get this done. Our European friends are not showing any enthusiasm to agree a delay, or the delay that Parliament has asked for. And I give way to the honourable lady.
Can I congratulate our Prime Minister on achieving this deal? Yeah. I always thought it would be enormously challenging to get all other 27 leaders to agree to change the deal. But this deal needs to be voted through not only by us, but also by the European Parliament and ratified across Europe. Does he agree with me that if we don't support the programme motion tonight, we add great uncertainty and push up the risk of no deal?
The honourable lady is completely right. Those who have argued for 3 years that they are motivated primarily for a desire to avoid no deal have only one logical course of action tonight, and that is to vote for a programme motion that ensures we leave with a deal on the 31st of October. Doing anything else would, I'm afraid, mean this House abdicating its responsibilities and handing over to the EU Council the decision on what happens next. Whether the EU would offer a short delay or a long delay or no delay. The decision would be down to the EU. And I must say the public does not want further delay, Mr. Speaker. This House has discussed these issues for 3.5 years. What on earth will the public think of us if this House again tonight votes not to get on with it, not to deliver Brexit on October the 31st, but to hand over control of what happens next to the EU, closing the path to leaving with a deal on the 31st of October and opening the path to no deal in 9 days' time. Because honourable members claim that they want weeks or months, perhaps even years more, to debate this matter. The public will not be deceived, Mr. Speaker, about the real purpose of such delay. When we are so nearly at the end of this process, are honourable members really going to tell their constituents that at the last hurdle they decided to hand the decision to Brussels? And even if the EU Council were to agree with Parliament on a further delay, what would happen in that period after October the 31st? As the Honourable Lady rightly says, yet more uncertainty that is holding our country back. And I invite honourable members to picture the businesses in our constituencies freezing their investments, the jobs that will never be created, the contracts that British firms will neither bid for nor win, the exports that will never leave our shores. And I give way to my honourable.
Very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. He will know that the Mayor of the West Midlands is in very close contact with manufacturers in the area, including Jaguar Land Rover. They are saying that the most damaging thing to manufacturing and industry as a whole is the uncertainty due to delay. They want, not just me, not just the Mayor, but manufacturers want the deal done, and the deal done now.
My right honourable friend is completely right, and the consequences of not getting this done and not voting through this deal tonight is to continue with the creeping paralysis that is affecting certain parts of our economy. And perhaps even worse, if we don't get this thing done, we face the continuing acrimony, the abuse that I'm afraid is still heard on both sides, perhaps increasingly heard on both sides of the argument. The divisions will continue. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Could I start, Mr. Speaker, by thanking the honourable member for Broxtowe and Nottingham East for helping me be noticed. I'm often hard to spot. But could I, and Ilford South, of course, could I bring the Prime Minister's attention to clause 31, which is basically the amendment that myself and my friend from Wigan put down to the last meaningful vote. However, whether by accident or by sneak, the Prime Minister has managed to add a small addendum, which means that any future vote would have to comply almost exclusively with the political declaration, meaning that this House would be constrained in what it could set as the future negotiating mandate. So could the Prime Minister explain why that's appeared? And could I also ask the Prime Minister on the purpose of scrutiny? This bill specifically disapplies Section 20 of the Constitutional Reform and Governments Act, which requires a 21-day resting period for all international treaties. Why has the Prime Minister taken the decision to do that on this? And is that something he plans to do on any future trade arrangements?
Mr. Speaker, on the honourable gentleman's point about clause 31, the intention is very clear. The intention is to allow the House to participate actively and fully in the building of the future partnership. And I think that if he reads the political declaration, he will see there is plenty of scope within that political declaration for a very active and full participation by all members of the House in devising that partnership. And on his second point about the deadline and the Constitutional Reform and Government Act, there is, in my view, ample time for us to get this done. This House of Commons has been discussing this issue for 3.5 years. We have chewed over this question again and again. Our constituents will not be fooled by any further delay. They will not understand why that is necessary. And if we delay again, I'm afraid that we will miss an opportunity to heal the divisions between us, and the paralysis will continue. So let me make it absolutely clear. There is no way. No, I won't give way, Mr. Speaker. I won't give way. Mr. Speaker, I won't give way. Mr. Speaker, I won't give way.
I hope it is a genuine point of order. I have me dukes. Point of order, Mr. David Linden.
Indeed, a genuine point of order concerning the programme motion. The BBC Breaking News app is reporting that the Prime Minister has said if he loses the programme motion, he will withdraw the bill. Now, given that the Prime Minister is talking about working with the House, has he given you any notice, sir, if the programme motion falls, that he intends to pull the bill tonight?
The Prime Minister has not given me any indication on that matter, and we must leave him to develop his case. The Prime Minister...
let me be very clear that, and I come to exactly the point the Honourable Gentleman raises, I will in no way allow months more of this. If Parliament refuses to allow Brexit to happen and instead gets its way and decides to delay everything until January or possibly longer, in those circumstances can the government continue with this. And with great regret, I must go directly to the point that the Honourable Gentleman raises. With great regret, I must say that the bill will have to be pulled, and we will have to go forward, much as the Right Honourable Gentleman may not like it, we will have to go forward to a general election. And I will argue at that election. No, Mr. Speaker. I will argue at that election, let's get Brexit done, and the Leader of the Opposition will make his case to spend 2020 having 2 referendums, one on Brexit and one on Scotland. And the people, Mr. Speaker, will decide. Mr. Speaker, there is another path. And that is to accept... No, I won't. And that is to accept, as I have done, that this deal does not give us everything that we wanted. And all of us can find clauses and provisions to which we can object as we can in any compromise. But it also gives us the opportunity to conclude that there is no dishonour in setting aside an entirely legitimate desire to deliver the perfect deal in the interest of seizing the great deal that is now within our grasp, of seizing the opportunity to begin healing those divisions, to satisfy the aching desire of the British public, that we would just get Brexit done and to move on to do what those who sent us here want us to do, and that is to address their priorities. For 3.5 years, this Parliament has been caught in a deadlock of its... Sit down. Has been caught in a deadlock of its own making. And
order! Notwithstanding the fact that the Honourable Gentleman Member for Kingston upon Hull East must emphatically be the loudest member of any Parliament anywhere in the European Union, he cannot insist that the Prime Minister gives way if the Prime Minister is disinclined to do so. I think the Prime Minister may be approaching his peroration, to which we should listen. The Prime Minister.
I do think I've given away quite a lot during this speech, and I do wish to wind up, because I know that honourable members will wish to make their own contributions, Mr. Speaker, to the debate. For 3.5 years, this Parliament has been caught in a deadlock of its own making, and the truth is that all of us bear a measure of responsibility for that outcome. And yet, by the same token, that we all bear a share of responsibility, we all have the same opportunity now. We all have the same opportunity now. The escape route is visible. The prize is visible before us. A new beginning with our friends and partners, a new beginning for a global, self-confident, outward-looking country that can do free trade deals around the world as one whole entire United Kingdom. The deal is here on the table. The legislation to deliver it is here before us. A clear majority in the country is now imploring us to get Brexit done in this House of Commons. And I say to the House, let us therefore do it, and let us do it now and tonight. And I commend this bill, Mr. Speaker, to the House.